Thank you for joining us for this afternoon session. What's new in Navigator for ArcGIS? My name is Scott Ball. With me, I've got Brent Pierce. Today, we're going to walk you through Navigator for ArcGIS. We're going to start with a little overview of what we call our field operations apps, one of which Navigator is. We're also going to talk through a little bit of an introduction, talk about some of the features of Navigator, and then we're going to get into the what's new. How many people are current users of Navigator? Just a handful. Okay, so the intro part and the going over the features is going to be an important piece for sure, and we will do that. So let's go ahead and get started. I see a few familiar faces, so this beginning part is going to be the same as our Explorer session from earlier in the day. But I do think it's important to kind of talk about field operations as a whole and how Esri thinks about our field operations suite of apps. And so we'll start here. And so we think about field operations in the different phases of work that an organization needs to go through in order to do field work. So it starts in the planning phase. You need to plan the work that you're going to do out in the field. And so we have applications that fit into that phase. And so the main one being Workforce for ArcGIS. So if you need to plan work, assign work, get people going out into the field doing things, one of our applications, like I said, is Workforce that helps you do that. So moving from the planning phase, once you've got everything planned, figured out what you want to go do, you need to get your people out to those things that you want them to go do out in the field. And so that's the navigate phase. And so that's what the session today is going to be about. And what we're really going to be focusing on for most of the session is using Navigator for ArcGIS to get out to the work that you need to do out in the field. The next phase that we really think about is understanding what's going on in the field. And so we have a couple different apps that help you do that. They help you maintain situational awareness while you're in the field, what's going on around me. Also figuring out where are the resources around me out in the field. And so we have apps like Explorer for ArcGIS. We gave a what's new on that this morning. I see some people attended that as well. So Explorer helps you understand what's going on around you. It's a simple map viewer app that helps you see and search for and find your assets and your resources out in the field. The next phase, once you're out there, you've found your asset, you've made your way to it, you need to do some work, you do some work, and then maybe you need to log that work and say, okay, I'm done doing that work. Or I saw that something needs to happen as a result of my visit here. This thing needs to be painted or it needs to be fixed or whatever. That's what we call data capture. And so capturing that information about what needs to be done and making it available in the back office in near real time is the capture phase. And we've got applications that help you do that. Things like Collector for ArcGIS, things like Survey 123 for ArcGIS. So those help you capture your information while you're in the field. And so while all of this is going on, you might have somebody back in the office that wants to know what all is going on, kind of in real time or at least near real time. And so that is the monitor phase of things. And so we have applications like Operations Dashboard that help you kind of see what's going on out in the field. We also have a new product coming out called Tracker for ArcGIS. And so Tracker will run on field workers' mobile devices. They can turn it on while they're out in the field, and their location will be reported back, and you can view it in things like Operations Dashboard, so the people back in the office have a real-time picture with the last known locations of all the people out doing the work. So that's how we think about field operations at Esri. Navigator is one piece of that story, but I do think it's important to kind of tell the entire story in case you're interested in some of the other applications that you may want to dig into in the future. So that being said, we do have all of these applications. We have a number of them that fit those different phases of work that you do when you're doing field operations, and they can be combined in different ways. And so this is kind of powerful. And Esri's strategy around mobile apps is to build focused mobile applications. We build things that do one slice of that kind of wheel very well. And so that allows us to do a couple things. It allows us to really focus our efforts and our resources very narrowly and figure out how to do this one piece very well. But it also allows partners and distributors and people just building applications to fit into that story as well. Because we know that not always will you want to use all of Esri's apps. Maybe there are some other apps that work better for your organization or some legacy apps that are built in-house. But you want to integrate that into the Esri story or integrate Esri into your story. And so this kind of focused app approach allows you to do that. And so we think about how you can enhance your field operations workflows by pairing different apps together. Right there in the middle, if you start with our planning application, which is Workforce for ArcGIS, you can then launch into the other Esri applications. So they very seamlessly work together, and so after you assign work and you get out there and you're about to do work, you can launch into Collector or Survey and actually record the results of that work that you did, then jump back into Workforce, go on about your day, do your other tasks. There are a number of different pairings that you can kind of look through here, but one that I want you to kind of keep in mind, considering this is Dev Summit, is this third-party integrations. You might build your own application. You might want to fire off one of our applications like Navigator or Explorer. We have integration tools and integration methods that allow you to do that. And I'll go over some of those for Navigator a little bit later, but do think about that. Think about how you might want to use your applications or your legacy applications, use Navigator as the navigation piece to get out to do the work, and then go on about your day. So these stories are all enabled through our focused application approach. Our customers do some really great work. They do some amazing things. From taking surveys and censuses out in the field, to fighting wildfires, to doing asset inspections on pipelines and invasive species data collection out in the field. All of these are things, real photographs from real customers showing what they are doing and how they are using Esri field applications to do their work better. So there's some really neat stuff going on in the field operations space. Just kind of as a whole, not Navigator specific, but as a whole, the field operations development team has a few themes for 2019 that we're really focusing on. I mentioned location tracking and our tracker for ArcGIS product. That is one of those key themes. So with location tracking, that is that tracker app on your mobile device. When you turn it on, your location will be seen and be able to be seen back in the office by people that are allowed to see it. That has implications through some of the other apps, things like Explorer, things like Collector. You'll be able to go in and turn on your tracks and see where you've been throughout the course of a day. So if you're out doing damage assessments or damage inspections, you can see, okay, I've already hit that house and that house and that house. I haven't been over here yet, so I need to go take a look at that. So integrating that location tracking story into our suite of field operations apps is something that we're thinking about very heavily in 2019. We're also looking at Windows 10. So Explorer is going to be our first app in 2019 that we're putting out on the Windows 10 platform. So we've been hearing more and more demand lately and more people telling us that they are using one device in their mobile workflows while they're out in the field. And that one device is a Windows 10 device. And so we are listening, we're hearing that, and so we're building out, starting with Explorer on Windows 10. So you'll be able to take your GIS data out into the field with you on your Windows device. Improving offline workflows is another thing that we are focusing on in the field operations suite of applications in 2019. Making it easier to take things offline. Take Pro. Right now, Pro is required. You need to use Pro to create these offline packages that then you can take into your mobile device. That kind of sets the bar at least a Pro expertise level of completing that workflow. And so what we're doing is we're moving towards a more ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise in their portal level of expertise. You just need to be able to use the map viewer to be able to create these offline workflows in the future. So we're moving that direction. It's going to be easier and easier to create these offline packages that can be used by your mobile field workers. Finally, we are constantly working on quality. We're always listening to users. We're listening to the feedback that comes in, what's working, what's not working, in order to increase usability of our applications. One of the things that we've been doing and focusing on recently is making our apps look and feel like one app suite. So you'll notice if you play with Navigator, if you play with Explorer, if you play with Collector, the most recent versions of all of those things, they're starting to look and feel very similar, and it feels like a suite of applications. So this is seems like it may be a small thing to us, but for users, especially for field workers, people that aren't really used to Esri technology or might be confused by switching from app to app to app, the more they feel the same and look the same and work the same, you're going to get some benefit there. So always looking to increase performance on mobile. That's always something our field operations folks are are looking for. So we've been paying attention to that, fixing bugs, etc. So with that said, that's kind of the field operations 50,000-foot view of the things that we're thinking about at Esri. Another thing that we want to think about is licensing. How do you get this stuff? How many people are familiar with these new user types? Have you seen that before? Okay, most of you, that's good. So Esri moved from a level 1, level 2 based licensing scheme, which level 1 was your viewers, level 2 was essentially everything else and threw in the kitchen sink, to this, which is a user type based licensing scheme. And so we've got viewers and editors and field workers and creators and GIS professionals, and you basically buy the license for what kind of work you do. So if you're a GIS professional and you need Pro and you need to be able to create things in your ArcGIS online or enterprise portal, you probably need that GIS professional license type. If you're just going out into the field and you really just use collector, you might want to just buy the field worker user type. And yes, it is a little bit cheaper than the other two above it. So these user types are something that you're going to want to kind of learn and know about as you get into the Esri ecosystem. And one other thing that I want to mention is that Navigator is an additional license. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but it does work with all of these user types. If you're an existing user of Navigator, you might be in the mindset that it only works with the level 2 named user. One change for 2019 is that Navigator is going to be available to all of the user types. So all of these guys are going to be able to buy Navigator and use it with their license, whatever it might be. So that was kind of the overview. That was the high level. I have a question.
Yeah, one quick question. For enterprise, what's the status on level 1 users with Navigator? Is that still roadmap or is it
So the question was, with enterprise and level 1 users, what's the status with Navigator? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's coming, I know, but I didn't know when it's coming.
Yeah, so Navigator will work with all user types in, I think at 10.7. So that's going to be this March release. So it'll work with everybody at that time. So let's get into talking about Navigator. Let's talk about, this is our 3 bullet slide. These are kind of the 3 main takeaways that we want you to walk away from this session knowing about Navigator. It is a turn-by-turn directions app. It will help you get where you're going in the field. We know that there are a lot of competitors in this space. You may use them on your mobile devices today. Navigator is a little bit different than them, and we have our own unique things that make Navigator really good and we think might make Navigator really good for your field users. So the first thing is Navigator is, by design, at the very beginning of the day, an offline experience. So Navigator works completely offline today. So if you're going where you need to go and you don't have good cell phone connectivity or you're not sure if the route has good connectivity, Navigator works offline. The second piece is you can use your own maps, your asset inventory, and custom roads to get where you're needing to go. So a lot of the other turn-by-turn direction apps don't integrate with your GIS system. Let's say you have all your well pads in your GIS, but how do you get out to them? How do you pass that over to one of those turn-by-turn systems? Sometimes it can be hard. And so Navigator, as part of the ArcGIS suite of applications, it can pull in your information, your assets, as long as they're part of that offline package, and navigate you right to where you need to go. Don't want to forget the custom roads piece. So if you need to go on roads that are not part of the main road network that a lot of the other turn-by-turn applications have as part of that app, Navigator is your huckleberry. It will get you across custom roads, things like timber roads, things like oil roads, just little small 2x2 dirt roads that you may have as part of your network. You can merge that with the commercial road network using ArcGIS tools and navigate across both networks to get where you need to go or to get your field workers where they need to go. And finally, you can traverse pre-planned routes for maximum efficiency. So pre-planned routes are a thing that have been around for a while on the ArcGIS ecosystem. But recently, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, and Brent's going to show us a good demo, how you can actually bring those pre-planned routes, those established stops, things like maybe snowplow routes, bus routes, maybe you've split up, you have like thousands of package deliveries that need to happen and you split those up into routes. Those can be published to ArcGIS and then consumed within Navigator by your drivers that are out there working in the field. So traversing those pre-planned routes is a key aspect of Navigator. So those are 3 big things that are differentiators that make you maybe want to think about Navigator as opposed to one of the other turn-by-turn apps. So getting into some of the details about Navigator, the prepackaged files that are available to you once you have a Navigator license have global coverage. So if you can see this map that I've got up here, items or countries that are in green have coverage to local roads. So that's really good coverage, down to very small level roads. Very small roads, you have those in North America, most of South America, a lot of Europe, Australia. Those are the best coverage options that you have. If you see the maps, the countries on the map in orange, those have coverage to major roads. And so if major road coverage is fine for your needs, then you wouldn't need anything additional. But if you need routing out to a specific well pad or some specific asset out in the field, you may want to supplement our major road network with your own local better road network if you have it. So these maps update from time to time. When you buy that Navigator license, you get access to all of those countries and all of that road network detail that I just talked about. And we update it from time to time. And so if you're in North America, we update those road networks 3 times a year. In Europe, we update them 2 times a year. And then all of the other countries that you saw that were supported are updated annually. So we will update those files on our system. You will see them as an update in your Navigator app, and you can download those onto your device and route completely offline. So as mentioned, working offline is a big selling point for Navigator. So talking a little bit through that workflow, this is how that works. So in Navigator, it does require a named user license. So you'll sign into Navigator with your named user license. You will download one of our Esri provided maps, if that works for you. You can download one of those maps onto your device. Then you start using the map in Navigator. Pretty simple. If you want to create your own custom maps, the workflow is very similar, but the process really starts in Pro. So what you would do in Pro, if you want to create your own road networks, which you totally can do, you would start in Pro, you would package up everything into a mobile map package, you would publish that to your ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise portal, and then the process is the same. You would sign into Navigator, you would see that that map is available, you would download it onto your device, and then you would continue on your way using Navigator to get turn-by-turn directions out to wherever you want to go. Do notice that if you package up your own custom network, you will need the Network Analyst extension. If you're wondering what's in one of these mobile map packages that you would need to package up if you want to do it yourself, it's these basic things. So you would need some kind of search capability, so you need to build in a geocoding locator. You would have to also put in a route layer, which consists of a network data set with a travel mode. So that's another piece that I hadn't really talked about much before, but you can totally set your own travel modes using Navigator. So if certain roads are only accessible by big trucks and you want to keep your big trucks off of small local roads, you can totally set travel modes and do that. If you need to get people across campus on golf carts and you want this path to only be a golf cart accessible path, you can definitely do that as well. So those are things that you would need to set in your mobile map package when you're creating your custom layer, is the network data set with the travel mode. And finally, they would need to see something in Navigator. So they're going to need to see a base map. So you're going to want to put that in the mobile map package. And then any operational layers that you're going to want them to see, things like well pads or assets or pipelines or anything that you want them to see from your GIS that will give them additional context while they're navigating out and about in the real world. You would also want to package that up and put it in the mobile map package. Another thing that you can do, so the first 2 options were, okay, I'm just going to use Esri's data. The second one was, I'm just going to use my data. You can also do a thing where you blend the 2 together. I mentioned this earlier. And we're kind of seeing it right here, the ability to take this dusty, dirty custom road network, blend it with a commercial Esri main road network, and publish that out to your Navigator users so that they can use it and navigate across both networks seamlessly. So if you want to do that, you absolutely can do it, but it does require a additional extension. You would need to have the Street Map Premium Custom Roads software to be able to kind of merge those two networks together. So again, totally doable. You just have to have the right licensing from us. So I mentioned early on when we were talking about the field operations, patterns, being able to use apps together, I mentioned that you could take your own custom app and write in some integration to launch one of our applications. And so we do that through something called a URL scheme. And so what our app can do is take some parameters from you as you're writing from your app. You say, I want to launch Navigator. Like, okay, we have a work management system. We want people to go out and do this work. Whenever they click on this button on their mobile device, we want Navigator to launch. And so you can definitely do that. And so you do that using a URL scheme. You invoke Navigator using the app scheme or the new web scheme. And then you pass us in some parameters. You pass in things like, what is the start location that you want your user to start from? What is the stop location where you want them to kind of stop in this particular workflow? If you want to go back to your application, they've navigated out to where they need to go, and then they want to jump back into your application, that's the callback. So you would mention your application in the callback scheme. If you can pass in multiple stops, so if you want to pass in multiple places that you want your workers to go, you can pass those in, and then you can either optimize those yourself. You might pass them in a specific order that you want your user to go, or you can have us optimize that route. And so Navigator has the ability to optimize the route for you. So you can just pass in 30 stops and tell us to optimize it, and we'll happily do that for you. We've also got some new items, things like being able to set the mobile map package that should be downloaded or opened upon launching Navigator. You can define that as well in case you want them to use specific MMPKs. Also, route item ID, being able to pass in a specific route layer, which we're going to show you here in a little bit. You can pass in a specific route layer that should be downloaded or opened on launch. So that's the case where you might have 1,000 packages to deliver. You create maybe 500 routes, and then maybe you want to pass in a specific route to a specific driver. You could do that using this route item ID, pass that specific route into them. So that is our URL scheme. It's well documented, so please go out to our help doc. We've got samples, we've got code out there for you. If that's interesting to you, please check it out. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over now to Brent, and he's going to show how you could build an app that could be integrated with Navigator and launch Navigator.
Thanks, Scott.
Yep.
All right. So like Scott mentioned, a lot of our customers right now are using this URL scheme. So all our apps support URL scheme, and obviously the parameters vary for what the actual app does. But there are some commonalities. And one pattern we see emerging is, since this is just really a link, you can kind of hide or reference that link behind a QR code. And now all the devices are really good at scanning QR codes. And actually in iOS, the latest OS of iOS, the camera app can just scan QR codes. So you don't even need a special app. So here I have a URL scheme, and see if it kind of comes across. It's a really simple one. It's just Navigator, and it's just referencing the route layer item. So it's just referencing that item ID. And what happens here is, since I have Navigator on my device, it will launch Navigator referencing that route. Let me try that one more time. Not sure what's going on there. Maybe I practiced this demo one too many times, but I have the I have the route. What's that? Okay. Maybe that's a self-defense mechanism because my demo's not going well. All right. Well, what was supposed to happen was that it's supposed to download the route and actually display it on screen. I have to figure out why it didn't do that, but you did notice that it actually launched Navigator. and it referenced that item ID, that route. And I already have that route downloaded onto Navigator here. So here, if I tap on my daily parcel inspections, it will load that route onto the device and onto the app. And then I can just hit go and start navigating. So tapping go here, I'm actually simulating what would look like to actually drive this route. And if I wasn't plugged into my Mac, it would be actually telling me turn-by-turn directions here as I'm navigating. Now, those familiar with Navigator will notice that in this version, this beta version of the 19.1 release of the software, we've updated the user experience quite a bit. We've made it very contrasting and very easy to see in work environments that are quite bright. So we use the black and white text. And also, as I'm navigating, we've made it very easy to pan and zoom around your map as you're navigating. Now, one thing that's also in URL schemes are callbacks. So I'd like to show a custom app that uses what's called a callback there. So let me jump out to an app that Joel created. And Joel, when is your session?
It's tomorrow at 2:30.
Okay. So Joel, who's studiously sitting in the front row here, a colleague, he has a session just on URL schemes. And when do you say it was?
2:30 tomorrow.
It's a demo theater, right? Okay, so 2:30. So if you're interested in this, Joel will go into many different examples of how you can integrate your apps with ours using URL schemes, and really just drilling into what you can do with URL schemes in all our different apps. This is an app that Joel created. I'm sure he'll be demoing it tomorrow, so I'm going to try to steal as much thunder as I possibly can from him right now. But this really shows how you can create your own iOS app or your own web app that uses a URL scheme to launch Navigator. So a simple work order app. If I tap on the ellipse, here I can get directions in Navigator, or I could view this in Explorer. So when I get directions in Navigator, what Joel's doing is just using some of those parameters to launch Navigator and generate a really quick route on the device. Now, what he's also doing is passing in a callback. So what the callback does is it facilitates this circular workflow. So he's passing in a callback to his app in the URL scheme. So once this route finishes, Navigator will recognize that there's a callback on that URL scheme and know to call back into the calling app. So it doesn't lock your users into Navigator. They'll actually get returned to the app that originally launched Navigator. So if we were to wait for this route to finish, at the end of it, it will actually call back into the app I just showed. And see, it returns me back to Joel's app, and it actually passed some information to Joel's app, graying out that particular work order. So Navigator can also pass information back to that calling application. So it's actually a really powerful feature of URL schemes, and we added this callback parameter just to facilitate those circular workflows, so you didn't get stuck in your navigation app when all you needed it to do was to get you where you need to be. So there's two quick demos of how we're seeing customers using the URL scheme. I definitely recommend attending Joel's session tomorrow because we'll go into deep dive in this.
It's called inter-app communication.
Inter-app communication is what it's called?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you,
Mark your
Brent.
calendars.
And thank you, Joel. We're looking forward to good things tomorrow. Okay, so moving into the meat of this session, what's new in Navigator for ArcGIS? So these are the things that, some of them we've touched on already, but if you've been using the application, these are the things that are new in the last year or so. And so the first one I already spoke on briefly was the fact that Esri has moved to this new licensing scheme that has a viewer, editor, field worker, creator, and GIS professional roles. There may be some more coming in the future. But the important thing is that Navigator can be licensed to work with all of them. Whereas in the past, it was only kind of the equivalent of the creator role and above. So that kind of opens the doors to allow more people to access Navigator for a little bit less money. So Navigator, as I've mentioned, does require a license. You do have to buy a separate Navigator license, and it pairs with a ArcGIS named user. Just keep that in mind. It is an additional premium app that costs a little bit of extra money. So another new thing that is coming or is soon to be in Navigator is that pop-ups will show feature info. So in previous versions of Navigator, you could maybe see that there was an item there or that there was an asset there or a feature there, but you couldn't tap on it and get the full rich information that was part of that item in the mobile map package. And now with our new release that Brent was showing, you will be able to do that. You'll be able to get all the attribute information in case you're not sure if this thing that you're about to navigate to is the actual asset that you're wanting to go to. So you can tap on it, look through the information, verify, yep, that's the one I wanted, or no, it's not the one I wanted. This also has support for attachments and any other media that might be part of that feature. So that is in the mobile map package, and it will work in this pop-up pane.
Are all of the three mandatory, or maybe you can just display?
I'm sorry?
Are all of the three components mandatory, or maybe you can just configure display and use a search and route from standard maps?
So the question was, these three things, these basic components, are all three mandatory? I'm going to kick that over to Brent. Brent, what do you say?
Just reading through your slide here. The search is not mandatory. You will need a network in it to be able to use it in Navigator, so we do check for that. So, to be able to download a map in Navigator, it has to have a proper network within that map. So Navigator won't be able to download any mobile map package. It has to be one that you can actually navigate on. And then, display, that's kind of mandatory because without the base map, you really have nothing to actually look at.
It'd be interesting to display your map, let's say an utility, but using the standard routing engine without having your own, because it's very hard for many companies to create their own network. It takes a lot of information that you must on the map.
Right. So I think the follow-on was just that you're talking about the friction of actually maintaining your own network for a utility company, and
even created it because it requires a lot of information in all of the rules.
Right. So the creation of the network is a heavy lift for smaller utilities or smaller customers, and I totally get that. What you can do in that regard is, when Scott was explaining that global data map, we provide data for you and networks for you. You can just grab your features and add those to our, merge those with our actual utility, our network, and you don't have to create your own network. Yeah. So that's, if you don't have any custom roads, and you're happy with our network and our roads, but you have your own feature data, you can merge that in with a mobile map package and then republish that. And then you don't have the burden of actually maintaining your own network, but you do have your pop-ups and your attributes that Scott showed here.
Yep. So another interesting thing and much requested thing was route pausing. So this is especially important as we make route layers usable in Navigator. You might have 30, 40 stops for your work in a day. In the past, what happened was when you stopped Navigator, it would kind of start over at the beginning every time. And so we're allowing you to now pause your route. Think of it as maybe lunch mode. I'm midway through my day and I need to go eat some lunch. I want to kill Navigator for a minute. When I come back, I can resume that route and continue on with the rest of my route for the rest of the day. Getting into some of the fiddly bits, people were asking for authentication, specifically IWA authentication, Windows-based authentication. So we're bringing support for IWA into our next release of Navigator. So hopefully some of you that have faced those authentication challenges, this will help for that. Another authentication thing that was requested that we built into this release is support for biometric authentication. So that's really saying, hey, use the local authentication. And so on my iPad, I've got my thumbprint set up and so I need to hit my thumbprint before I can get into the iPad. You can use that same thumbprint and that local authentication to get into Navigator. Let's say you have sensitive asset information in your Navigator mobile map package, and you don't want just anybody to be able to pick up your device and see that attribute information that you can now view in Navigator. We've built in the ability to unlock Navigator or require a thumbprint to get into Navigator. So as mentioned, kind of the key feature for this new release is support for route layers. And that really kind of starts today in Pro or somewhere in the ArcGIS platform. There are many, many ways to create route layers today. You can use ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. They have tools such as Closest Facility, Route, or the VRP. And so any of those tools can create routes for you and publish those to ArcGIS. And again, ArcGIS being online or enterprise. Once you get those route layers created using one of these tools or one of the APIs, SDKs, the map viewer using enterprise or pro, you publish that to ArcGIS. And then once it's on ArcGIS, I think you probably know the pattern. You just download it to your device on using Navigator, pull it down, and then you can go on your way and traverse that route. So that being said, I'm going to kick it back to Brent, and Brent's actually going to show us how this works using a pre-planned route. Or you're actually going to create a route, aren't you?
I don't know. We'll find out. So yeah, I will create a couple routes, hopefully. So I'll start to do that. I'll start the demo in the map viewer. So I'm connected to my org. I'm looking at a map I have. This happens to be a map of Palm Springs, so you can kind of see the convention center there. And the parcels in yellow are properties that are past due on their property taxes. So I have a bunch of inspectors, and I need to prepare a route for one of my inspectors to go out and inspect these parcels. So probably the easiest way to do that is to just start by using the directions widget within the map viewer. So as I click on the different parcels I see here, I can add different stops. And what's happening here is it's going out and calculating a route based on the stops I'm laying down on the map. So it's using the directions widget to do so. I'll give it a little bit of time to think here. My machine gets a little nervous at demos, so it slows down. But you see the route I just created. So I can, from there, share that route out with my drivers in this next release of Navigator. And what's really powerful about this is I can add things like barriers. So barriers are, as the name would suggest, a way to inhibit the route in some way. So say I got a call that there's a really bad accident at this intersection over here. Well, I could lay a barrier down here, and I'll do that right now. I'll put a barrier down here because I want to prevent any of my drivers from going through that intersection because they're going to get stuck in a big mess there. And it automatically regenerates the route, and I can save this route as a route layer online and then share that with my drivers. And when I save that route as a route layer, it doesn't only save the route geometry and all the stops, but it also saves that barrier. So if my drivers were to download that route and recalculate in the field, it still won't go through that intersection. So it saves that information. So it's a subtle but really powerful difference between just passing a bunch of stops via a URL scheme to Navigator versus actually using a route layer. So I can save that from here. I've already gone ahead and done that. So let me jump over to to my machine here. And here's my iOS device. What Navigator does is it just automatically downloads route layers at different points as you're using the app. So it opportunistically just sees there's a new route layer, and it'll pull that down to the application. Now, these are in what we call the panel here. In the bottom panel, I cannot search for places. I can search for my features, but if I just change this tab or this segmented control here, I can see all the routes that have been downloaded onto my device. So again, if I was to tap on this route, tap go, it will navigate now through the route. Now I can pan and zoom. This is another new thing in Navigator. We let you manipulate the map in different ways as you're navigating. So we heard some feedback from you guys. And then if I tap on that GIS or GPS icon in the top right, it actually gets me back into this kind of pan to follow mode. So it's nice to be able to check out your route and then get back into pan to follow if you're driving. And again, we've optimized the UX quite a bit to make it easier while you're in the field doing this. Now, the last feature I'd like to show you is the ability to pause a route. So if I was to tap end here, what happens is it doesn't blow away my route. It remembers all that state. It remembers which stops I've hit already. It remembers exactly where I was. But I can pause that and I can go maybe grab some lunch somewhere. I can go and do something like open up a pop-up, another new feature in Navigator. So if I tap on that pop-up, I get access to all that content. So not only do I get access to the attributes in that pop-up, but this pop-up specifically has been authored with media. So here I have charts and graphs I can get access to. So some really nice interfaces for field workers to get the information they need when they're in the field using Navigator to get their job done. So I have media, but I also have attachments, an actual real popular feature. Here I have an attachment of just a simple JPEG, a picture of that area, but you can go as fancy as something like a drone flyover. Here's a short video of a drone flyover of that property. So you can really do a lot with attachments. We support a lot of different MIME types for the attachment. It's actually really popular with PDFs, you know, engineering diagrams, stuff like that that'll attach to the feature, and it's available for your field workers when you're in the field. Now, closing that pop-up down, I can again resume the navigation and pick up exactly where I left off. So if you have your whole route with your 20 stops for the day, you can just pause it, go to lunch, open pop-ups, work with the map, and then resume your navigation. And again, finish up, and it just tells me I've completed my route. So that's a quick tour of some of the new features that are available in the 19.1 version of Navigator, which we're now in beta on. So if you're interested in trying it out, come see us and we'll get you hooked up with a version of the app so you can let us know how it works for you guys.
Can you pair this with Tracker?
Sorry, the question was,
can you pair this also with Tracker?
That's okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
So,
I'm working a specific case on this. I got a couple of trucks going around, and they have to cover an area with a pre-planned route like this, and they need to also know where they are. They must display on their computer where they are, and that's what Tracker does.
Yep.
And also know where they have been, because maybe some geo-event server or something like that has to post-process and then create a new feature, like linear feature class, displaying all the parts that they have already covered, and maybe intercept the wires or the cables that are around, buffered by the area that they've covered.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the question, just to summarize is, can Navigator be paired with Tracker? And the answer to that is not yet, but we're working on it. So it's Explorer supports it right now, and Navigator will support it. So if you have Navigator running on the device, it will you will be able to turn on your tracks and be able to see exactly where you were on the map. So that we plan both those apps to integrate really well together. Now, on that point, some customers have been very interested in Tracker to, generate more routes or generate more road data. So you might have Tracker running on a field truck, in the middle of nowhere, but you don't actually have road data. There are procedures in place, or there's a workflow to get all those tracker points and turn those actually into viable road data. And then you could feed those back into Navigator so you can actually navigate or route on them. So if you're interested in that workflow, happy to talk about it after this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to also add to that, the question was really about, can Tracker and Navigator work together? They can work together on the same device. You can have Tracker running and you can have Navigator running. And so I think what Brent was saying was, today you can't see your Tracker tracks in Navigator, but they can both be running at the same time. And so if you have Tracker running and people back in the office can see your last known location, they can see the tracks of where you've been.
Yeah, it should be a single product.
And we're working on it. So that's the intent.
Why the Navigator just say, track me? And then you see, together with the pre-planned routes, you also see where you have been.
Yeah.
And then being able, having dots or lines that are stored somewhere in the feature in some database so that you can post-process those.
Sure. So, yeah. So the question was, why wasn't it built into Navigator? We looked at that. We looked at building it into the individual applications, and we decided the better approach for us and for our customers was to build a specific app called Tracker that can then work really easily with things like Navigator or Explorer, the other apps. And so in Explorer, I don't know if you saw that demo, but it's essentially just going to be another layer. So you'll be able to turn on a layer called Tracks. And so even though it's not built into Explorer, Explorer knows how to read those tracks that are on your device, and it will display those on the map inside Explorer. And so I anticipate we'll probably be able to do something similar with Navigator without too much effort.
Yeah, that's the exact same plan for Navigator.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I can collect all the requirements from the customer, and because I told them this is not going to be something easy to solve, and there are many components coming out. It might be an all geo event solution with some black box GPS sensor on the truck, and then sending information to the geo event server and display an online web map.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yes, we love hearing requirements. Please get those to us. Come see us after the session, and I'll get you a business card, and we'll absolutely take those requirements.
Yeah, those always really help if we can get good requirements. Yeah, gentleman in the yellow hat.
Super quick one. The attachments you were showing were packaged into the map package, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So everything I showed in Navigator was in the map package. So map packages can have basically all the GIS packaged into a single map. So all the data, all the features, all the attachments, everything.
Do you support URLs in the attachments so we can get our attachments from our server if we have connectivity?
Do we support URLs in the attachments? In a map package, I don't believe we do. Joel, do you know of any workaround to that?
Put the URL in the field.
Sure. Yeah.
There's ways you can probably talk after it's on.
Yeah, we support URLs. It's just not in to reference an attachment. But there's ways to do it. Yeah, we can chat on it.
Cool. So one other question. We're looking pretty good on time, so.
If you're running your Navigator offline, does the tracker, and you're running Tracker 2, does Tracker just save up the information?
That's right. So the question was, if you're offline and you're running Tracker, what happens to those points that are being collected? Yeah, essentially there's a data store on your device, and it's just sticking them in there. And then when you get connectivity again, it will be uploaded to whatever you're connected to, whether it be, well, at first release, it's going to be ArcGIS Enterprise, and then later it'll come to ArcGIS Online. So it'll work locally if you're offline. Cool. Sweet. Great demo. So the last little bit that we want to talk about before we open it up for questions more broadly is roadmap. When you're going to be able to get this stuff. So this is kind of the tentative plan so far. We're working on beta releases on the Android and iOS platforms. You can kind of see when the various features are coming into the various platforms, but largely this new feature is going to be this new release is going to be a lot of those features that we've shown during this session. Pre-planned routes is the biggest one, but things like pop-ups, IWA support, panning and zooming while navigating, you saw that a little bit ago, pausing navigation, and then the major UI improvements to make it just more consistent with the rest of the applications and more usable through some of those contrast things that Brent was talking about. So we anticipate the final release on both iOS and Android before our users conference in July. So that will be in the next few months. So with that being said, that kind of brings us to the end of the planned material. Please go into your app if you've been using the Esri Events app. Find this session and rate us. Tell us how we did. This information does come back to us, so we will get that information, and we love the feedback. We love to know what we can do better. We love to know if you liked it, if you got what you needed out of it. So please go in there, give us that feedback. And with that, let's open it up more broadly to questions. So are there any other questions that people have about Navigator or ArcGIS in general? Yep. Yeah.
One thing I didn't see or rather hear was audible turn-by-turn instructions. Is that coming or is that planned?
Yeah, it's there. That's when I demo, and this isn't quite hooked up to plug it in, so you can pipe the audio through but if I was to just demo on the fly, which is what you're never supposed to do.
There's really tempting fate here.
Let me see here. Yeah, if I unplug right now and then I start, hopefully my Bluetooth isn't hooked up, but
Starting navigation.
you can kind of.
Right on East Tackwoods Canyon Way. In 300
So
feet,
this is what
the
you would hear if I
destination is
wasn't
the
on HDMI. Yeah, Spanish was not her first language. If you can hear her pronounce some of the roads around here, but it's always been in the app, and this isn't a new feature. And actually, a lot of our customers don't even use the interface at all. They just start navigating, throw it behind their seat, and then just
It also says we can't have a screen visible in the truck.
right. Yeah.
30 inches, so.
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time making sure that the voice orations are descriptive enough to get you where you need to go, so you didn't have to keep looking at your map and looking at the device. So yeah, that's been in Navigator since the beginning, and we've tried to improve it over the releases.
Thank you. Support for Italian language, both for GUI and
The question was
do you plan support for Italian language?
Italian. So the question was Italian support, and yeah, we do support Italian. It's localized into Italian.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
The audio as well?
What's that?
The audio turn-by-turn voice guidance as well?
Yeah,
How does
I
that work?
believe so. The audio is, yes, it is supported in Italian. There are some languages where the device manufacturer does not provide a text-to-speech engine for that specific language. The one that comes to mind right now is Estonian. That's the one we've had troubles with. But Italian, iOS, and Android definitely have the text-to-speech provider for those languages.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
You provide rerouting if the driver gets off the route.
Yeah, no, good question. The question was around rerouting, and yes, so Navigator will automatically reroute as soon as you get off the route by a significant amount. You know, it would be about the same threshold that you would see in like Google Maps or Apple Maps. The other nice thing about rerouting is with those route layers, you saw the barrier I drew in there, it takes that barrier into consideration when generating the new route. So it won't route you through anywhere that the barrier is laid down. So that's another advantage to these pre-planned routes. But I definitely recommend staying on the route though. It's just good policy.
How about traffic information?
Good question. So traffic, the question was around traffic information in Navigator. So Navigator is an offline app. And because of that, obviously we don't get access to live traffic feeds. Now what we have done is we've embedded historic traffic information into these networks. So it will take traffic into consideration, at least historically traffic dense areas. It won't route you through the center of a city at rush hour, for instance. But that will be at the time of the route generation. Now, where we want to go in the future is, it's kind of a little bit backwards, but we want to bring Navigator online. And what that means is we want to, keep all the benefits of Navigator working offline, but also provide access to services like live traffic, so it can make real-time decisions as to the best route at the time you're going to be there. So that's something.
Before the July release?
No, it won't be before the July release. That's going to be probably in the 19.2 release or the next release after that.
Yeah, second half of the year is when we're going to be looking at those kind of things for Navigator. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us this
Thank you.
afternoon. Hopefully it's been useful.
Yes.